The transition to a new year is fast approaching, and it's a good opportunity to reflect back on the past year and make some plans and set some goals for the year ahead. And right now, there's lots of people making videos about this and writing about this and sharing, yearly review templates and things like that. What I want to do is a little bit different. I want to make two suggestions for how to approach an end of year review and a coming year goal setting session a bit differently. And this is based on how my own approach to this has changed over the years. So here is some uncommon end of year review advice. I do think that the transition to a new year is a great moment to reflect and review and set goals, and it's something I've done every year in some form or another for a long time. However, the specifics of how I've done it have continued changing year to year. And one of the lessons that I've learned that has changed how I approach this is that I used to be very, very goal and performance oriented in doing this. And I think that is also the most common stuff you find. Like if you look at how people talk about doing an end of year review, then it's usually very, very goal focused, performance focused, right? Set your goals for next year, like break down your big goals into small chunks, make sure that you achieve the things you want to achieve next year. And while I think that there is a lot of value in that, I also noticed that especially over longer time frames, it basically never works out. So if at the beginning of the year, I set this plan and I try to be very specific about here are the business goals I want to achieve, or these are the products or features I want to launch, these are the milestones I want to reach, and so on. Usually, by the time the year comes to a close, most of that stuff hasn't happened and isn't relevant anymore. And it's not because I failed to achieve my goals. It's because that as things develop, there's always a need to be flexible. There's always a need to basically adjust to what is happening. And in terms of, for a business, planning for a business, what I've always found is that planning too far ahead basically doesn't work, because as you release new products or features or marketing campaigns or whatever you do, you essentially get feedback from the market. And it makes much more sense to keep doing more of what works and less of what didn't work than to stick to a plan that you set 6 months ago, which at that point might become arbitrary. And I think the same is true for personal life goals. I think there's more value in being able to remain flexible than in kind of strictly adhering to a plan just because you made one at the beginning of the year. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't set goals for the year, but for me, I've just noticed that the value seems to be more in like it points me in a certain direction. It gives me something to aim for, but then I also give myself the freedom to be flexible as the year unfolds. So for this reason, I've put less and less emphasis on trying to set very specific goals and break them down into milestones and this kind of thing. I do that on shorter timelines, but I don't do it on the timeline of an entire year. So then the question is what to do instead. And this is where my two pieces of uncommon advice come in. I'm going to make two suggestions. I'm going to formulate both of them as a question. And the first one is for your year review. So looking back at the past year, what would happen if you spent most of your time and most of your focus on celebrating the wins and thinking about and expanding upon what went well? I make this suggestion because we all have the tendency to be negative and critical. This is called the negativity bias. You're probably aware of this. Our brain is simply wired to notice negative stuff more. Also, chances are that you grew up in a culture that was very mistake and criticism focused, right? You went to school where people count your mistakes. It's like your mistakes are what matter. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. You're supposed to avoid mistakes. So it's like we're very criticism and mistake focused. And this can creep into how we do an end of year review, where we look at last year's goals and we go, okay, I didn't accomplish this. I didn't manage this. What didn't I do well? How can I learn from my mistakes? What went wrong? How can I make sure that I don't make the same mistakes going forward? But what would happen if you flip that around? What would happen if you spent time looking at what went well? What were the highlights of the past year? What turned out great? What are the things you're most proud of? So I'm not saying ignore mistakes that you could learn from, but if you're doing something like a written end of year review, what if you spend at least twice as much time thinking about and writing about what went well and celebrating your wins? The reason I say this is because by counteracting this built-in negativity bias that we have, you might find that there's actually more you can learn from your successes than you can learn from failures. Sometimes the best thing to do is just to do more of what went well, to do more of what's already great instead of constantly trying to fix whatever went wrong. And also, as a side effect, you might just enjoy the whole process more, and there's nothing wrong with that. My second suggestion is about how to think ahead and plan for the year ahead. And here, the question is, what would happen if you thought about it and planned in terms of how you want to spend your time instead of in terms of specific goals and milestones? I make this suggestion because this has actually been one of the most powerful things for me that I tried, and it worked surprisingly well. So like I mentioned before, I used to be much more goals and milestones and specific accomplishments focused. What happened at some point is that I was thinking about it, and I actually can't remember how I came up with this, or maybe I read about it somewhere, I can't remember. But for some reason, I was thinking of it in terms of, what do I want to spend my time doing? And after some writing and thinking, what came out is that I want to spend as much time as possible, or I want to spend more of my time learning and teaching. And that is because learning and teaching are things that I love doing. They're very much aligned with my interests, with my natural curiosity, and also with my strengths. I'm at my best when I spend a lot of time learning and synthesizing what I learn. And I am good at teaching. This is one of my strongest skills. This is also something that the world is telling me if I pay attention. A lot of people tell me that they want to learn more from me. I get really good feedback on my courses, on workshops and retreats and things like that I do. I also enjoy it a lot. I love teaching. So that is one of my strengths. At some point, I was thinking in terms of what direction do I want to go going forward in my life? I want to prioritize, I want to spend more time learning and teaching, and essentially using that as a marker of success. If I'm spending more time learning and teaching, that's good. If I continually spend my time doing other stuff, I'm distracted from learning and teaching, that's a problem I want to solve. And this has made a huge difference for me. In recent years, especially in the last 2 years or so, I can say that that is where the majority of my time and energy is spent. I spend a lot of time learning and teaching, and it has been really good for me. It's been really good for me in terms of I enjoy my life more. I enjoy spending my time like this. My stress levels are lower. And it's also been good for me in terms of that is the direction like my business and my work is going in. And a lot of opportunities are opening up, and it's basically been great in ways that I not necessarily would have been able to plan for, as in, I'm going to hit these milestones by Q2 or whatever. It's a much more organic process, but as I've been spending more time learning and teaching, more and more opportunities have opened up. I got into coaching without actually ever planning to do so, and that's been going well. And many other such opportunities have kind of just opened up for me, and it seems to be working, right? It works across the board, without me ever feeling like I am in a high tension pursuit of some very specific goal. Something that's really powerful about this is that how we spend our time essentially reveals our true priorities. Time is a limited resource, and it doesn't matter if you say that you care about something. If you don't spend time on that thing, it's basically not a priority. And so this is the biggest change I think that happened to me. Like, I would have told you that learning and teaching are important to me many years ago, but in reality, I was spending lots of time working on other stuff. I was often doing work that didn't feel aligned, doing work that didn't feel like this is actually me doing my best work or doing stuff that I'm really good at. It's kind of just necessary work, putting out fires, or even kind of distraction, right? I'm distracting myself with work. I'm just working out of habit, that kind of thing. And with this focus of just like, okay, how can I spend more time learning and teaching? I've just been able to steer towards activities that are much better for me, that I'm better at, and that make me feel better as well. So before I made this really clear to myself, I would have said that learning and teaching is important, but in terms of how I spent my time, I wasn't making it a priority. Now I'm actually making it a priority, and it's been fantastic. So that is why my second suggestion is, what would happen if you, instead of focusing on goals and milestones, you focus on and ask yourself the question, what do I want to spend my time doing? And then as you go through the coming year, you can take that as almost like a compass needle, right? Where you just go, okay, am I spending time on the things that I said are most important to me? Am I spending my time in the way I want to be spending it? And if not, how can I start nudging my course towards that direction? So those are my 2 suggestions in very short. What if you focus more on your wins than on mistakes to learn from? And 2, what if you focus more on where to spend your time than what exactly to achieve? If you feel inspired to try this out, Maybe do your whole end of year review around this topic, or maybe just incorporate this in whatever end of year review you're already doing. If you have any questions about this, or if you try this out and have an interesting insight or experience with it, I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and leave a comment below if you do. And with that, I am wishing you a wonderful end of the year and all the best in the new year. I'm looking forward to seeing you then.